the colonial Africa manifestations and gendered balance, politics in post-colonial Kenya. Oloyande, Kayonde, Ondesai. This is pleasant. And even this one. This one is there. He's there. He's the one who is coming. Yes. For housekeeping, we are going to give each presenter 15 minutes. And then after the presentation, we'll ask the questions. I want us to start with the first presenter, who is Oloyande. You are our first presenter, presenting on decolonial African manifestations and gendered balance politics in post-colonial Kenya. For the sake of the audience, I'm Dr. Judy Mwangi from Mount Kenya University. I am a gender expert. My field is gender and development. I want to take this opportunity to welcome our first presenter, Oloyande. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Olayode Kayode Adesoye, a graduate student from the University of Nairobi in the Department of Political Science and Public Administration. I came briefly to embark on PhD student in January, and I came across the conference, and I thought of putting something in the paper to come and be part of this conference. So I want to lay this foundation that as a graduate student in the field of gender and politics and ethnicity, this study grew out of the interest, especially in the area of what characterized Kenyan politics over and above Nigerian, that Kenya can talk of chief executive in the counties and member of parliament, much more than Nigeria, that we've never thought of having governor or chief executive as chief executive in our state. Again, I have in mind that whatsoever comes or in form of responses or questions after this paper will enable me to enrich the work for further deliberation. Thank you. The topic is the colonial African manifestations and gender balance politics in post-colonial Kenya. Then I have as introductions, post-colonialism suggests a decolonial period in Africa that Stigner research interests developed mostly on African colonized states. If we look at the work of people like Mbiti, Walter Rodney, Ade Ajayi in Nigeria, all of them stem their study in politics, in things that have to do with decolonialism, centering on post-colonial African states. Then thereafter, proper documentation of African history, philosophy, artifacts grew from their interest in searching for establishment of African identity in global literature. Of course, there seemed diverse discourse and scholastic African works on political, economic, social development of pre-colonial African states and their manifestation in comparison to the colonial era. Their interest grew out of, yes, what African states witnessed during colonial period, and what would they see or have they witnessed in the the colonial era that have manifested in different things. Of course, what was the politics thereafter, post-colonialism? What were the political economy in the the colonial era? And what characterized what Africans are doing, put in quotes now, democracy afterward colonialism. And of course, the colonial manifestation in African, therefore, border on topical issues such as demilitarism, democratizations, constitutionalism, transparency, accountability, as well as ethnicity, racialism, and gender polarity, of which this paper discusses the colonial manifestation in the prevailing social segmentation of Kenya, a society dominated by patriarchal political structure that places obstacles in mainstreaming women into politics. The objectives of this study seek to trace and explain political development of post-colonial Kenya from the patriarchal background of a male-dominated political system to a gender-conscious polity with a defined women quota system in the politics of Kenya. And by the way of addressing it, it seeks to unravel the challenges of Kenyan female individuals faced in politics to fill the vacuum created by polarity of gender in political representations. Of course, the significance of the study remains that it will provide credence to the post-2010 President Kibaki constitutional development that gave a blueprint or a quota system on how gender politics of gender should become a balanced issue in terms of Kenya politics, the societal leadership, etc. So the aim at collapsing metaphoric male-centric background of Kenya politics through increasing female representations becomes aims of this paper. Yes, the study puts in place some frameworks by defining what gender is all about. It makes clarification between the background of social roles attached to different genders and the biological expectations that have created inequality among the genders we have in the society. Further clarification was also made, or is also made by this paper, to explain the theory of patriarchy. As patriarchy explains an agreement in society where males are expected to determine all decision-making processes. Patriarchy is also examined or looked by this work as an arrowhead and where females should not be held by normatively approved male dominance with control of economic resources and power in all matters that affect the society. Not only patriarchal theory, the work also considered the theory of feminists, which from yesterday has been looked at by different keynote addresses that were given here. And even this morning, Dr. Francisca has spoken about feminism this morning. Then, of course, we look here that feminism criticizes patriarchal opinion, being disillusion, discrimination in line of sex, race, or ethnicity. Then taking a cue from countries like Rwanda, Senegal, South Africa, and even Liberia that have women in position of leadership. This work desire to place, with the theoretical explanation, to justify the place for Kenyan women in pedestal for more women inclusion in political participation, representation, and places of leadership. Feminism, as well as examined by this work, look at the surge in questioning the harmful effects of women's socio-political and economic structure in society, as we can look in the work of Kabira and Kimani and others. The theory on feminism argues that women are versatile in handling issues as men, such as conflict resolution, negotiation, and diplomacy, because they possess an enhanced capability to bond, form lasting relationship, and empathize with others. Of course, still on the issue of feminism as this work conceptualized, feminism describes that men exploit, cheat, suppress, and oppress women, much more in the place of leadership now. The theory, therefore, in reflection to African society as Kenya, decries the patriarchal arrangement of the polity where women are exploited, subordinated, and underrepresented. The main argument with this work is that prior to the 21st century, sketchy records of Kenyan women or African leaders were seen in political engagement. Of course, we have work documented by United Nations, which led to such conferences that emanated in 2005, and the 1995 and Namibia conference, Nairobi conference that came in 2005. All these were eye-openers that, spur more women to ask for their place in politics and in places of leadership in East Africa, especially in Kenya polity. So improvement in women political status and representation at all levels of decision-making, therefore, received constitutional amendment, as we have in the 2010 Constitution of Kenya that became pronounced with the coming of government in 2013 of President I can't pick the name now. President Wai Kibaki. Thank you. So post-independence Kenya witnessed such. With that, women in Kenya politics came to be known, and we have the work of people that came to the front line of leadership as Grace Monica, popular known as Yambugu, Phoebe Asio, Kalagatis, and many others. So the adoption of 2010 Constitution in Kenya became a total turnaround in the polity of Kenya, of course, which signaled that Kenya women have a major place to ask, which signal that Kenya women should strive to have a balance in political leadership and other places of leadership. Of course, we have that as documented in the Kenya Constitution of 2010, which is a former blueprint that gave a clear-cut terms that discriminations in terms of race, sex, pregnancy, marital status, ethnic or social origin, color, age, disability whatsoever should not be the basis of position of leadership, especially position of politics, in the place of politics. So this work came out with finding that so far 2010 Constitution of Kenya, successive administration have not been able to put this quota system or this blueprint into practice, as we have different records, as we can have by this diagram, by this table, that shows that yes, women have not been given equal representation as a mark by the Constitution of Kenya of 2010. And of course, based on that, representation of women remain minimal to date. In fact, the last election that was held last August, where women pushed for more political places or positions, but yet came out with a reduced in number of women in places or in place of political leadership. We have a figure that gave us that, yes, the governor that were elected were reduced compared to what we have in the past, the previous 5 years back. So, be that is made, Kenya's politics have not been able to put in place the two-third quota system that says that, yes, no place of, no position either in place of societal place or politics should have more than two-thirds of one gender. Rather, it should cut across. So the work recommend or suggest that, yes, quota system that should encourage more women in political participation should be reinforced with gender responsive and clear rules and procedure by the internal democracy, which will ensure that the processes on the identification, nomination, and selection of candidates for position of power and decision-making within party favor more women than their men counterpart or their male counterpart. Of course, again, it suggests that different political parties should think of adopting a mechanism of waiving the conduct of primary election to favor women, right from constituency unit, so that women will be retained and there will be their place of increase in leadership and political participation. We have a balance as marked by the Constitution. And not only mechanism that we waive primary election and other artificial barrier for women to come out in political inclusivity or inclusion in politics should be put in place or institutionalized in Kenya politics. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kayonde, for your presentation. Let us appreciate him with a better clap. He has taken us through the aspect of gendered balanced politics in Kenya, which all of us, we know about it. We know where we are. We know we have very good policies, a very good constitution, but still, according to his finding, we still have the gaps. The gaps are still there. We are yet to attain gender balance. I want to invite the next presenter, our second presenter, that is Pils Kakai Daktari and Kevin Kakai also, to come and do their presentation on the role of electoral law in Kenya in tackling sexual and gender-based violence against women during the selection period. You're welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, powerful people. Today, I want to join a co-presenter to discuss mambo ya gender. I want to request you to slightly adjust that topic because we brought the topic when it was still in process, and then we finalized with the topic to read limits of electoral governance, sexual and gender-based violence against women during elections in Kenya. Limits of electoral law and laws governing sexual and gender-based violence against women during elections in Kenya. So kindly, that is what we want to use as our working title, as opposed to the earlier one of the role. So in fact, what the chair has talked about is within the area of the gaps. So we are talking about the limits of electoral laws and the laws governing sexual and gender-based violence. And in our discussion, we will highlight, one, the causes of sexual and gender-based violence. We will also look at the impact of sexual and gender-based violence. We will also look at the legal framework governing the sexual and gender-based violence in the electoral process. Then we'll be looking at the limits of electoral laws and laws governing sexual offenses. And we will end by giving recommendations. So the real paper now follows from my co-presenter.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yes, so I'm Toyin, and I'll be presenting the paper with my co-author. Are you sure you can listen to my voice? Okay, they are setting up, so just a minute. Two. Okay, I believe now I'm a bit audible. So as the title of the paper, as we've been told, it's Limits of Electoral Laws and Laws Governing Sexual and Gender-Based Violence Against Women During Elections in Kenya. The definition we adopted for sexual and gender-based violence, which in the presentation I'll be referring to as SGBV, we adopted the definition which states that SGBV is any act that is perpetrated against a person's will and is based on gender norms and unequal power relationships. And examples of this are rape, sexual assault, physical assault, among others. So basically, in order to identify the limits of the said laws, we first need to establish what causes SGBV. And from our research, we identified a number of factors which cause SGBV. First, we have the social and socio-cultural factors. In many African communities, traditionally, women are viewed as being subordinate to men, or rather inferior to men. And this mentality has been passed on through generations, unfortunately. And the men who grow up based on this mentality use it to justify violence against women. Another factor which we identify as causing SGBV is unequal power relationships between men and women. Basically, culture and tradition play a key role in the participation of women in electoral processes. And in the African context, where they believe, as we have said in the previous section, they believe women are inferior, subordinate to men. They do not want women to hold powerful positions, leadership positions, and as such, they put hurdles so that women cannot get into those positions. In Kenya, this has led, for instance, the introduction of the 2/3 gender principle. As we've been told by the previous discussion, it has not yet come into life. We would like to appreciate the works of the judiciary with regard to ensuring the 2/3 gender principle is adhered to. You can see even the former CJ had to recommend the dissolution of parliament to the president. However, that did not happen. Somebody rushed to court and that action was suspended. We also have the judiciary, I believe in December 2022. Actually, in 2016, if you can remember, the judiciary in this sense, I'm talking about the Supreme Court, the actual bench, it was not compliant with the 2/3 gender principle. And when it advertised for the positions, unfortunately, the positions were filled by male judges, and somebody moved to court to challenge the composition of the judiciary. And as recent as December 2022, the Court of Appeal at Nairobi made a determination stating that the 2/3 gender rule had, in actual sense, during that time, the Supreme Court was not compliant. However, during that case, one of the counsel in that matter had argued that the bench might not have been, actually argued that the Supreme Court was had complied with the 2/3 gender principle by the fact that considering other employees in the lower cadres. However, the court in that situation was emphatic and stated that the 2/3 in this sense does not mean when you have two people, let's say for instance, 7 male judges, but in the lower positions, the support staff, you have 100% women. That does not make the Supreme Court fully compliant with the 2/3 gender rule. So that's just a case to show how the judiciary has addressed that situation. So another cause of SGBV is the failure or reluctance of law enforcement agencies to investigate and prosecute SGBV crimes. The police have been reluctant in a number of situations in taking up SGBV matters by investigating and submitting the files to the DPP to prosecute them. And this has led to emboldening of the offenders who now commit the offenses more freely because they know the repercussions might not catch up with them. We have in the presentation given 2 cases to show situations where the police have failed, or rather to follow up on cases which have been reported on SGBV. Yeah, and the court in those situations admonished the police for that. The cases we've cited in our presentation are CK, a child through Ripples International as her guardian, an extra friend, and 11 others versus Commissioner of Police to the Inspector General of the National Police Service. Yeah, and we've given the citation there. The other case is the Coalition on Violence Against Women and 11 others versus Attorney General of the Republic of Kenya. And we have the Kenya Human Rights Commission being the interested party in that matter, and the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights being an amicus. Another cause is the police brutality and use of excessive force, where the police have used excessive force, especially during elections, and they are considered to be partial, leaning towards the ruling parties. Under this, we've given a case of Wamwere and 6 others, I believe, versus the Attorney General. The Wamwere in this case is the mother of Koigi Wamwere. She and other women who were mothers of political prisoners around 1992 were demonstrating for the release of their sons who are political prisoners. and the court in this case found the police having been guilty of police brutality and excessive force towards the ladies. And in this case, the court actually granted the petitioners in this case, they are each granted damages worth Kenya shillings 2.5 million. Another cause is economic factors. Due to lack or inadequate access to economic resources by women, this increases their vulnerability to violence. In the interest of time, I'll move a bit quickly. Next, you have the impact of SGBV on the victims. There are a number of impacts. We have the physical impact where they actually suffer harm. They have injuries, some are immobilized, and also they get some STIs. We have another impact, psychological impact. SGBV takes a mental toll on the victims, and some even contemplate suicide, and some eventually actualize on their suicidal thoughts. We also have the economic impact. Healthcare in Kenya is not free, so the cost of seeking medical treatment takes also a toll on them. We also have the social impact, where it has led to the breaking up of families. For instance, you find somebody, the victim has suffered injuries and has become, for instance, immobilized. You'll find some spouses tend to leave the victim and move out elsewhere. Under the legal framework, by pursuant to Article 2, 5, and 6 of the Constitution, the general rules of international law and treaties and treaties which are ratified by Kenya are part of Kenyan law. Under the international instruments which Kenya is a party to, we have the CEDAW, which is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which basically covers sexual violence in the context of discrimination. We also have the ICCPR, which is the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. We also have the what we popularly refer to as CAT, the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel and Inhuman or Degrading Treatment or Punishment, which also speak to the aspect of violence and prohibiting it. Regionally, we are a party to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights and the Protocol to African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the Rights of Women in Africa, which is basically referred to as the Maputo Protocol. And both instruments are geared towards prohibiting, punishing, and preventing all acts perpetrated against women. And locally, we have the domestic laws. We have the Constitution of Kenya, which dedicates an entire chapter to the Bill of Rights, and that is Chapter 4. Under the electoral laws, which touch on SGBV or violence in the general sense, we have the Elections Act, which also has a code which all participants in the elections are required to adhere to. And it's under the code, violence is prohibited, and there are penalties in case parties violate that. We also have the Elections Offences Act 2016, which basically is an act which was enacted to create election offences. And it, among the offences are the use of violence, and it also provides hefty fines for culprits in that matter. We also have the Sexual Offences Act 2006, which establishes a number of SGBV offences such as rape, defilement, among others. And also we have the Penal Code, which basically creates the many crimes such as murder, manslaughter, assaults causing bodily harm, among others, which are part of the SGBV offenses. From our going through the legal framework, we were able to establish that actually the law, we have an impressive legal framework to deal with the SGBV, but we are still having instances of SGBV during elections. So we identified a number of factors which limit the effectiveness of the law in addressing SGBV matters. And the following are the limits which we identified. The first one is laxity of law enforcement agencies in prosecuting SGBV matters. In that you can remember earlier we said that we demonstrated with case law that the police have been reluctant to conduct investigations into SGBV matters, and this discourages victims to take their matters to follow basically the legal process, and also it emboldens the offenders. Another limiting factor which we identify is the reluctance by victims to report cases to the police, and this is due to a number of factors, and these factors include stigma, the fear of being looked down upon by others, the fear of retaliation by the offenders, also the fear of bringing shame to the family, and that's in quotation, and the fear of not getting justice. Another factor which we identified, we have the delay in determination of SGBV cases. As most might be aware, the judiciary has quite a huge backlog of cases. So between the time in which you institute a suit and the time in which the suit is determined takes quite a while. However, the judiciary, through the Judicial Service Commission, has attempted to address this by employing many judicial officers. However, the situation has just been cleared a little, but there are still backlog issues. Another limiting factor we identified is the lack of awareness of victims' rights and obligations. Okay. Yeah, the lack of awareness of victims' rights and obligations. Another limiting factor is ADR, alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. The Constitution under Article 159(2)(c) encourages the use of ADR as a dispute resolution mechanism, and ADR includes the TDR, which is the traditional dispute resolution mechanisms. You'll find under some communities where the offenders are known to them, they enter into some arrangements where the offending party pays the family or the clan of the victim a certain amount, and they settle that matter, and they do not proceed to the full legal process. And this also limits the effectiveness of the law, as the offenders might not be really stopped, or rather it won't be an effective deterrent measure. In concluding, just 2 minutes I conclude. Basically, now I'll move to the recommendations. We recommend for measures of taking police being accountable, steps which can be taken, system in which once a report has been made to the police, that report can be followed up to its conclusion, so that once a report is made, somebody can go to the police and check, or at home check the progress of that report. We also recommend the taking of measures to protect victims and witnesses. We are aware the Witness Protection Agency has attempted this, however, it's facing some challenges. We also recommend the sensitization of the public of their rights and obligations under the law, and this we recommend the key stakeholders in the criminal justice sector to undertake this exercise. And we also recommend the compensation of victims of SGBV matters, and discouragement of out-of-court settlement, and also adoption of SGBV protection mechanisms by the national and county governments. Due to time constraints, that was my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kakai, for your detailed presentation. I want to take this opportunity. We appreciate Kakai and Dr. Kakai for the presentation. Let us appreciate them with a clap. I want to request all the members to continue putting down your comments and your questions as we invite another online presenter who has just joined. And at this point, we are going to invite Miliam Hamza to do her presentation. Miliam, are you there? This is Miriam. Miliam Hamza. Media, are we able to get her to do her presentation?
The network is
Miriam Hamza, can you hear us? You have 10 minutes. Media.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can I start my presentation? Good morning, panel. Can I start?
Please go on.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Permit me to stand on the existing protocol. My name is Mariam Hamza. I'm from the Nigerian Defense Academy, Nigeria, Kaduna State, Nigeria. And my paper is titled Gender and Culture, a study of Muslim Northern Nigerian women in Nigerian military. The paper started with seeking why we have very low representation of Northern Nigerian Muslim Hausa women in the Nigerian military. And the questions that the paper generated is why we have this low number. Is it culture, or is it the religion? Or is it a combination of all, or it's based on the patriarchal framework laid by the jihad and colonialism? Am I audible enough? Hello?
Continue, we can hear you.
Okay. So the paper is actually divided into 4 sections. The first started with the background to the Islamic culture and gender in northern Nigeria. In that section, I looked at how the Islamic culture influenced the culture in northern Nigeria, which affected gender and gender roles. In that paper, I took a look at how, in that section, I took a look at how Islamic, the Sharia and Islamic jurisprudence has impacted and enshrined in the institution of northern Nigeria all the universal code that provided the religious, the political, social, intellectual, and legal system, which covers all the spectrum of life for Muslims in not just Nigeria, but all Muslim nations. However, that has impacted on the way generally northern Nigerians kind of lay out their lives. It has impacted on the culture, it has impacted on the way of dressing, it has impacted on basically everything. So there's a thin line that actually basically separates religion and culture in the north. Most of the northern culture, especially the Hausa culture, has been eroded to look like it's an Islamic culture. The only cultures that are still left are those that does not contravene Islam. So that on its own has impacted on the role of women in society. I'm sorry, before I delve into that, I should have told the panel what I refer to as northern Nigeria, the Muslim northern Nigeria Hausa-speaking states. We have about 5 of those states that are basically Hausa-speaking. They are Jigawa State, Sokoto State, Katsina State, Zamfara State, Kebbi State, and Kano State. The others have a mixture of other local dialects, but these states that I've mentioned are basically where you find purely Hausa-speaking people with some ethnic minority groups there. So this is what actually has influenced the culture. Islamic religion has basically taken over the Hausa culture. So, and like I've already mentioned, it has also outlined how women have, kind of play out their roles. This transformation started from before the jihad, and when the jihad came, the Usman Dan Fodio jihad came, it also institutionalized this seclusion of women away from the public domain. So what I'm saying is that apart from the patriarchal gender conservatism of northern Nigeria, the religion also was a factor that has led to that seclusion of women, which impacted on the present times enrollment of women in the military, in the Nigerian military. Now, the section on the second section looked at the background to the military and gender. In that section, I looked at pre-Nigerian military history, where before colonialism, each culture or each community or kingdom you go, women were basically part and parcel of society. They were institutional in the economy, in the political scene, in whatever aspect you're talking about. So even in the Nigerian military, though it says that now that the Nigerian military is gender neutral, but because of the issues of colonialism, it has affected the way Nigerian military enrolls women. Usually, there is always a certain percentage of number of women that should be enrolled into the military. However, over the years, that hasn't even been fulfilled. In fact, to an extent that in the Nigerian army, there was a period where the enrollment of women, of girls into the Nigerian Defense Academy had to be stopped because of that argument around whether women could participate in combat roles. So that also is another factor. The Nigerian military posits itself as a gender-neutral institution. However, from all indication from the statistics that we have, it shows that even the 5% that was later increased to 11% hasn't really been fulfilled. And in that light, even when you find women, you find most of them coming from other parts of Nigeria, southern Nigeria. Even those from the northern Nigeria, right, are not Hausa or Fulani Muslims. They are actually from other parts of the north, even though they are Muslims. But the Hausa women, you will never find. So in the next section, which is the main crux of the work, I looked at the history of Muslim Hausa women in northern Nigeria. I mean, Hausa Muslim women of northern Nigeria in the military. From there, I took a look at the history of pre-jihad Hausa land and the role of women. I took a look at the Daura kingdom before the intrusion of the Arab and consequent introduction of Islam, where we had Queen Daurama, who held significant position in leadership. There were other titles held by women, like title of Magaja, who was a queen mother. If you look at the history of also Zamfara kingdom, it also had the Magaja, who was called, there was Queen Ergoje, who was also a very powerful female. There was Queen Amina, her mother, her mother, who was also a very powerful lady called Queen Turunku, born in period around 1533. So this also just shows you the level of women involvement in political leadership in northern Nigeria, in Hausa land, before the coming of the jihad. When the jihad came, even though that seclusion happened, it also had people like Nana Asma'u, who, even though didn't hold any political seat, but from the background, played significant roles. After colonialism, we had people like this lady. We had people like there was a woman in Zaria who was constantly jailed because of her involvement in a basically male-dominated domain, which was politics, because of the very harsh attitude of men towards women in leadership position. So the final aspect of this paper, which is the main crux of this paper, is the factors responsible for the poor enrollment of women, Hausa Muslim women in the military. From the oral interviews I conducted, I looked at the reasons. I sampled opinions of Islamic clerics, I sampled opinions of parents, I sampled opinions of even military officers, 7 military officers in the Nigerian military, to find out, and even some of the female that are Muslims but are not Hausas, why we have this issue of very non-existent number of Muslim Hausa women in the Nigerian military. So some of the answers I got were not different from what we already know, what I've already highlighted. Number one is the religion. I think there is a misconception and misinterpretation of that aspect of why women, because some made reference of the fact that the Prophet, during his lifetime, made mention of a place where, when he was told that a woman is leading that place, he said that land must be an unfortunate land. So there is a huge misinterpretation. He didn't really say that women cannot be in leadership positions, but because of how the religious scriptures are interpreted, that could mean that women should not partake in leadership. And so it affected also women in the military. Secondly, the military institution is seen as a very male-dominated institution because of those basic trainings and other things that they do, which they see as very anti-feminine culture, kind of. Besides, apart from that, in the Nigerian military now, once they start their training, they will enroll, the enlisted participants will have to wear a t-shirt and shorts, which is absolutely against Islamic dressing. Apart from that, they have to leave the hair open. There is no Hausa female that is expected to be seen going around with t-shirt and short niqab and with the hair open. Then further than that, after they get admitted, after they have passed the screening test, they have to even scrape the hair, which is also against Islamic tenets. If a lady has to shave the hair, it has to be because of one reason or the other, maybe sickness or something. So that is one thing that has discouraged women from participating. Another point is that there is this intermingling of both, is also anti-Islamic. It is part of Islamic rules that men and women should not be allowed to intermingle. And so,
Miriam, can you hear me? Miriam.
Yes, I'm with you. Yes.
Please.
You. Madam Moderator, I can hear you. Can I continue? Can I continue? Moderator? Dr. Violet?
Yes, somebody called me.
So in conclusion, the paper has outlined 3 to 4 basic factors that have prevented women from, as well Hausa Northern Nigerian women from enrolling in the military. The culture is the religion, some personal reasons, some even are related to sexual harassment. So these are some of the recommendations of this paper. Number 1, the paper recommends that there should be a very deliberate attempt to see that our ulamas and northern and the traditional institution preach that the religion does not limit women participation in any regard. Secondly, the culture, when it comes to culture, we have to look at what is beneficial and what is not beneficial, so that it will open opportunities for more Hausa women to partake in the military, even so that to the point that it should not contravene the Sharia. And then there should be constitutional amendment to cater for those peculiar needs of Muslim women, like dressing, like head cover, like separate arrangement and accommodation. And then lastly, there should be a multidimensional approach that needs to be adopted in the society for the mobilization of women into the Nigerian military that is befitting of the religion of Islam. So thank you very much.
Okay, I have three questions, or rather two. One is quick ones. One, I will seek the first speaker's comment. We are aware that women participation in politics is measured by their share of parliamentary, ministerial level positions. But we are acutely aware that in Kenya, we can point out that there are some ministries that are given to women and they are described as social. For example, we have social services, culture, and this is in contrast with some powerful ministries that are held by men. For example, finance, planning. I would like to seek your comment. The second question is about the role of women in liberation struggle. Actually, for example, the Mau Mau, we have notable women like Wanje wa Madorika, we have Mekatilili wa Menza, who really fought for independence. They made tremendous contribution. So my question is this: why is it that despite their tremendous efforts in the liberation struggle, they continue to punch below their weight? That they still haven't gotten their equal share of the benefits of the liberation struggle. So the last question, the first speaker will respond, and I also would like to hear the view of Hamza on this. That as historians, we are aware that the women's life in politics is based on monarchy, inheritance, and family dynasty. So currently in Kenya, we have daughters, widows, sisters, etc. that benefited from their family relationship. They have been elected to leadership on the tickets of their spouses, fathers, etc. And this has made them to align themselves to the existing patriarchal system. Thereby, they have made no or little efforts to bring reforms. So the question on that is, are women in politics not doing enough to bring about systemic reforms in relation to gender equality? Thank you.
My comment is on the third presentation. There was an iconoclastic writer who once said that women are not denied to serve in the military necessarily because they are weaker than men, but because societies need plenty of women to reproduce themselves. This is an argument that verges on production and reproduction. Maybe what Hamza is talking about is just what you call the superstructure. But the substructure is about what is the underlying motive? Because we have had weak, strong, very strong women leading armies everywhere. But now when it becomes regimented, of course, we are very happy when there is no war. In fact, some people have served in the army and gone away without shooting a single shot. But when there is war, I think societies become very, very scared because of reproduction, which is part of generation of wealth. Because in many societies, wealth begins with population. I don't know how she may react to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the comment that I'll make cuts across, but there are particular areas which Miriam may also respond to. And building on where the Dean left, as historians, we are called upon to historicize and to problematize issues. And in the construction of historical and social context, there are three important factors: religion, ideology, and culture, which define and enforce norms, values, and standards. Now, in view of this, when we are engaging particular sectors and institutions, we have to interrogate the point at which, therefore, each of those are configured and they are particularly interspersed and percolated by the ideology of patriarchy, bearing in mind that patriarchy as an ideology is a social ordering instrument. It organizes how society is ordered. And for that matter, whether we are talking about the legal arena, we have to interrogate the role religion, culture, and ideology penetrate that domain in order to give us a jurisprudence of a certain type. Whether we are talking of the military, we cannot separate those. And in view of this, given that the patriarchal ideology is characterized by the ideology of feminization, which is very clear in what we can call housewifeification of the woman, restricting the woman to a certain role as an ideology of domesticity. The presenters, can you comment, therefore, on how the various domains that you have identified are circumscribed by these three factors? If you can isolate for us some instances, we'll be very happy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, moderator, for this opportunity. I came in while Kevin was presenting your paper, but was able to capture something out of it. I'm interested. What is this issue of violence against women? How is it perceived, not only in Kenya, but in Africa in general? But how about at the international level? So as I was seated here, I was still trying to go through what you presented. I decided to draft something small. But my issues are, now, the marginalization of women, should not be seen as an accident of culture or a sociological issue, but as a legal issue. Sorry, I'm picking up your paper because your paper is more legal than historical, but it has its own historical antecedents which you've managed to capture some of the issues here. As a legal issue that has a force of the normative standards demanded as an internationally protected human right. Now, I go straight to the questions I wanted to raise. Now, before that, human rights protection was a question of chance those days, historically. Now, admittedly, men more often than not had better chances than women did. I'm sure many of us here can agree with that. Some were luckier than others, having been born from the womb of a woman, lucky to be born in a state that protected her security and interests. Many of us can figure out which countries, for instance. Now, the right to secure and to live in dignity, regardless of gender, was a matter of winning a chance or lottery. But should any state, no, that's your question now, should any state rely solely on their laws and their own domestic institutions for the issues you just shared with us here today? Number two, should we not contend that the promises of the human rights message of universality should include the protection of women not based on domestic agendas but on international law? And then another issue I'm raising, are not all states obligated to protect all humans regardless of gender? To wind up, I'll just tell us, please, violence against women must be viewed as a violation of human rights and not an aberration of culture, morality, or merely domestic law. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. The moderator. I will address all the questions together, and I want to put it in this way, though, by the way of not shying away from addressing them. I'm quite aware that, yes, countries like Kenya or Ethiopia, Kenya, and others in Africa are among the leading frontiers in women and in creating balance between the genders. And of course, in relation to what the first person asked, country like Kenya has provided in blueprint, as in the constitution, certain quotas for women. Like my country, we don't have that. which take us back that yes, women are still placed in maybe the home state of affairs. So imbalance between men and women that the society are clamping for now today do not raise any point. And of course, historically and in African context, we may not remove the fact that, yes, of truth, women don't stand a chance with men. But today, that yes, with all other things that are, you and I, that we cannot try to take away that giving equal education to male and female, and as such, we are removing the imbalance and other things that have removed the fact that, yes, women should be not servitude in this case, but to be at the back of man to complement whatsoever we desire in the society. Universalism does not guarantee that, yes, men and women are equal. However, we are working with what the society is tending towards in the present world and, of course, in the globalized world, that, yes, women should, the imbalance in biological, in other aspects whatsoever should be bridged. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Move on. Kakai, you can answer.
Yes, I'll answer the questions directed to me.
Yes.
The first one is how is SGBV the first one is how SGBV is viewed both locally and internationally as an issue. It's actually on paper it's viewed it's a serious issue, but now when you go to the ground, how it's being handled, we see it's not being dealt as a serious issue. That's why we gave examples of the laxity in the law enforcement agencies in investigating SGBV matters. We've seen the manner in which the 2/3 gender rule has how basically it has not been achieved, despite there being the law stating that initially it was supposed to be within 5 years. The period was extended, but up to date, nothing concrete has come out of it. The other question was, should we only rely on the law? That's ideally we should rely on the law. However, from the presentation you've seen, the law is there, but we are still having incidences of SGBV coming up time and again. So I think we need to be creative and see how we can not solely rely on the law, but that will now open another Pandora's box. So it's a dicey issue. I believe those were mine. I'll let Dr. Kakai to finish the rest.
Which was the last? I thought the others were making comments like this is of Mau, or the one who was saying, are women MPs not making enough effort to bring about gender equity? I thought that one, we will leave the debate outside because it's not within our paper, isn't it? I will be wasting your time.
I want us to be taken directly to Mariam Hamza, because there are some questions that were directed specifically to her so that she can respond. Mariam, are you there? Miriam, are you there? There are some questions that are directed to you specifically.
One of the questions was whether women are not doing enough to be heard. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. For me, I think yes, maybe women are not doing enough. Like, if I take example of where I come from northern Nigeria, I think yes, women are not doing yet enough. So there's a need, there's a concrete need for a lot of sensitization and advocacy, and then role modeling, so that young female coming up should understand that there's a place for women in every aspect of society, in politics, in the military, in academics, in everywhere. I think when comparing the northern part of Nigeria to other parts of Nigeria, there is a very low representation of women in plenty of aspects. So yes, let me say that yes, if we're taking northern Nigeria, which is my case study, there is really not a lot of things have been done. The talks are there in the background, but with a louder voice, not yet. So there's a need for that. Then the other question I think I can, because I didn't get all the questions, is whether we can separate culture, ideology, and religion. And my answer is no. My answer is no. Because the truth of the matter is, there are arguments around whether the religion is not also using a patriarchal framework to explain the role of men and women. And then some scholars have come up with the notion that yes, that ideology of patriarchy is really the bedrock of all of this cultural and religious issues. So we cannot separate the three. So the two aspects, religion, culture, and other factors are dependent on that ideology, which I think is the reason why it has affected the death in the enrollment of women in the military and even other sectors of economy and society. I think these are the two questions I really got, because there's a bit of network glitches here. Thank you.
Thank you for your answers and your comments. I want the media to take us to the online participants. We take 2 questions. Questions from the online. To see, yes, there is one person there. Yes, we can hear you.
Need them, and the society need them to model children and leaders of tomorrow to be good people, not just to leave the home and be looking for places in Aso Rock and be looking for places in the National Assembly and so on and so forth. As others are doing that, please we should also remember that we have a duty to perform for the society, because the society is becoming unbearable, it's becoming uninhabitable, and I think the contribution of women to this is becoming more and more noticeable. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Silvanas. Thank you, Silvanas, for your comment. I know you have directed your comment to Hamza, but I think it is a general comment that you have noted. The members have noted. I don't think there is anything that can be commented other than what you have said. We need to look whether there is anybody else that have a comment or a question online. Media, do you have anybody else? There isn't. I think with that, we have come to the end of this session. I know the matters related to gender is something that we can continue discussing, and we continue discussing the whole day, because it is an emerging issue that keeps on affecting each one of us. And this discussion will continue as we continue with our theme of the conference. And I'm very sure at the end of the day, we'll be able to make viable recommendations on how to address the issues of gender. I want at this point to appreciate each one of you, both those who are present here and those who are online. And at this juncture, I want us to clap for presenters for a well presentation. We give them 3 claps. And you also applaud yourself for being very active in the session. Thank you very much. I want to hand over to Dr. Wekesa to give us the logistical directions. Thank you.
Maybe we should also clap for the chair for work well done, and of course the rapporteurs and moderators who are behind the scenes. Very quick things. We want to break for our lunch, and I want to request that we take that lunch within the shortest time possible. In the afternoon, we are having a plenary session. We are moving from art, from gender to literature. The speaker has been here with us, and I think is still here with us, Dr. Tom Odhiambo. So he's waiting. So the faster we do this, the better for all of us. I'm sure lunch is ready. Let's move there in about 20, 30 minutes. Let's reconvene.